Today, we are digging into the incredible story of the gold standard. You know, it's this economic system that was built on a pretty simple idea, but it once ruled the entire world's finances, right before it all came crashing down. Let's dive in.
So you have to ask the question, right? Why on earth would you tie the fate of the whole global economy to a shiny rock? It sounds almost, I don't know, kind of primitive. But for centuries, this was literally the bedrock of global finance. To get why, we need to understand what the gold standard actually was.
Okay, think of it like a giant global coat check. Every single dollar or pound or franc in your pocket was basically a claim ticket. In theory, you could just walk up to a bank, hand over your paper ticket, and get a specific, guaranteed amount of actual physical gold in return. This meant money wasn't just paper. It had real, tangible value that everyone agreed on.
And you know what? For a good long while, this system worked, like really well. That period from the late 1800s up to 1914 is often called the golden age of the gold standard, because it really was the backbone of a truly globalized economy.
It really kicked off with Great Britain, which was the financial superpower of the 19th century. They led the way. Then, you see Germany jump on board after the Franco-Prussian War. They actually used the massive war payments they got from France, all paid in gold, to back their new currency. And then, when the United States finally made it official in 1900, that was it. The global network was complete.
So what was the big deal? Why did everyone want in on this? Well, the appeal was huge. With every major currency pegged to gold, exchange rates between countries were fixed. They were stable. And that was a massive, massive boost for international trade. But maybe the biggest promise of all was discipline. It meant governments couldn't just fire up the printing presses and create money out of thin air. No, they had to have the gold to back it up.
But here's the irony. That very same discipline, the thing that was its greatest strength, would eventually become its fatal flaw. Because the 20th century was about to unleash a kind of crisis that the gold standard was just not designed to handle.
And that crisis, of course, was World War I. A total war demanded total economic mobilization. Governments had to spend these unimaginable sums of money on weapons, soldiers, supplies. And that rigid rule of you can only spend the gold you have, that was suddenly out the window. One by one, countries just had to suspend the standard and start printing money.
Now, even after the war, so many people still saw the gold standard as the only way to get back to normal. You'd hear economists and politicians talking about sound money and fiscal responsibility. They were desperately trying to glue the pieces back together, but the world had completely changed. The war debts were staggering, the whole economic landscape was different. The old system, it was already broken.
And if World War I created the first cracks, what came next was the final, catastrophic blow. The Roaring '20s gave way to a global economic winter that would just shatter the gold standard once and for all.
The Great Depression was a worldwide nightmare. And the gold standard? It basically acted like an economic straitjacket. It helped spread the crisis from one country to another, and this is the crucial part. It stopped governments from doing what they needed to do. They couldn't lower interest rates, they couldn't increase the money supply to get their economies moving again because their hands were tied by their gold reserves.
The result was an absolute catastrophe. As economies fell apart, countries started hoarding their gold and putting up huge trade barriers. International trade just ground to a halt. I mean, look at this. In just 4 years, global trade collapsed by 2/3. That's a staggering, almost unbelievable decline.
And you have to remember, behind these massive economic numbers, there was a devastating human cost. In the US alone, at its peak, 1 out of every 4 workers wasn't employed. The system that was once supposed to guarantee stability was now making an unprecedented disaster even worse.
So, facing a total collapse, countries pretty much saw only one way out. And the dominoes started to fall. Great Britain, the country that started the whole thing, was the first major power to leave. The US followed just a couple years later. By 1936, the classic gold standard, it was dead.
So, what happened next? After decades of believing that gold was the only real foundation for money, the world suddenly had to invent a completely new system from scratch.
And that brings us to the world we all live in today. We use what's called fiat currency. That dollar bill in your wallet, it's not a claim ticket for gold anymore. Its value comes purely from the trust and the confidence we all have in the government that issues it, in its stability, its economic strength, and its promise to keep the value of that money relatively stable.
You see, the story of money is always changing. It's always evolving. We went from gold bars to government promises. And that leaves us with a really fascinating thought to end on. As we head deeper into this age of digital currencies, crypto, and all kinds of new financial tech, what's going to be the standard of the future? What will we all decide to put our trust in next?